All this broken LS430 really needed was a replacement transmission, but once I dug in to find a myriad of oil leaks, mismatched coil packs, oil-soaked alternators, questionable water pumps, and gaskets that were hard as a rock, I couldn't just do only a transmission swap. That's just not my style or how we roll here on this channel, because if it's not as good as it was when it left the factory, then it's just not good enough. In the last episode, we fully rebuilt the whole front end of the engine with all brand new OEM everything, but we ran into a show-stopping issue with the exhaust. The flange where the manifold meets up to the catalytic converter, one of the studs broke off. These other ones are just seemingly fusion welded in there. I tried heat, drilling, twisting, everything I could, and it just wouldn't come off. So instead of wasting more of my life in misery, I decided to look for a used manifold on eBay, and I did manage to find one for just 90 bucks, which, as you can see, I mean, look at the runners and the tube, it's just in better shape than mine anyway, which also gives me the excuse to replace both of the O2 sensors, which is nearly impossible while it's in the car, and we can slap some new exhaust manifold gaskets on there. So let's get to cracking. All right, let's go ahead and get this old one out of here. This is a 22. That wasn't on tight. That's way less difficult than I expected. Then we got some brand new OE Denso O2 sensors going in. And then this is the manifold for the driver's side. So it's the one that has the short pigtail, which is not this one. Of course not. Slot it in, thread it in. To tighten this one down, I don't really want to remove the heat shield because those bolts are so rusted. I wonder if I could just bend this shield temporarily. Yeah, that does work. I'll take it. I think that's tight. Pretty sure. Probably tighter than I could get it if I was working on this underneath the car. Work spec on these bad boys is only 32 foot-pounds, so that's why it was so easy to get out, and I don't really have to worry about it from here. So let me knock out the other one, and we'll get these bad boys put back on the engine. And then we got these new OEM exhaust studs for the manifolds to hang off on the heads, so let's go ahead and get these in. These have a little E10 Torx on the end of them to tighten them down, but they basically have no torque on them. So all you gotta do is just thread it in, and then we can use the gun to run it down, but there's that little stopper right there. So as soon as you hit it, you don't need to send it. It doesn't need to be mega tight in there. Got my gun on the lowest setting. Brand new gasket. Just gonna quickly use a little wire brush to clean up the surface of this sealing surfaces right here and where the gasket meets the stud. Then we'll just blow it out so we're not sending crap down into the cat litter. And we'll just slot this on. Get a couple nuts on here to help us hold it. These nuts are 14s. And then they're torqued to 32 foot-pounds. Don't know why that one's giving me trouble, but it is definitely tight. So it turns out when you use the wrong size socket, you might end up tearing up your nuts. But I've learned my lesson with stuff like this, and I've started buying like 2 extra whenever I buy nuts and bolts because they're so cheap anyway that if I make a mistake like that, having an extra one on hand is just so nice and worth the possibility of, you know, just adding it to the spare bolt box up there. There we go, driver's manifold on. So now we just need to take our O2 sensor, feed it up in here, and plug it in right there. I mean, even that, accessing it with all the space because the engine is out and the transmission is not in the way, even plugging in that sensor is difficult. I cannot imagine doing this on the car. So shout out to all of you guys that have said you've got to replace the O2 sensors while it's out. Our heat shields can go on now. They got a little brake clean bath. Not the greatest thing ever, but certainly better than nothing. You know the drill. The O2 sensors get to go to a new home. Where should our exhaust go? I think it's finally time to get this replacement transmission attached back to the engine. There's been so many setbacks along the way that I'm kind of doubting myself. So many setbacks, whether it just be having to spend more money, order more parts, running into problems I couldn't avoid, just all kinds of different things. But I think it's actually time. So let's go ahead and do a little bit more prep here on the transmission, and then we're gonna get it attached to the engine. So this little shift linkage that runs all the way back to the gear shifter in the car, it has a little bushing right here, and as you can see, it's absolutely clapped. It's just a little rubber grommet, and there's just a clip back there. Luckily, both of which are still available OEM Toyota, so I was able to grab that grommet and the clip. There's only like $3. So let's go ahead and swap those out. Oh, shifting gears. Oh yeah. There we go. Just breaking it, but that'll work. I wanted the pin too, but that wasn't available. And then we gotta fish this grommet out. Pliers to the rescue? Question mark? Yep. A little bit of silicone spray on the grommet so it slides in easy. Yeah. There we go. And then our new clip. Come on. Why you no go in? Seriously, why is this so difficult? Oh my God, after a frankly redonkulous amount of time, I finally got this clip on. Had to get vice grips to squeeze that grommet in the fitting so that the little hook would grab around it. But we cool now. And is it as sloppy as before? Definitely not. It's much tighter. So hopefully that feels good in the shifter. Cool. Up next, rejoining back to the engine. So this is just dangling on the engine stand, which is actually pretty incredible if you look at how well balanced it is. I mean, it's not sitting on the ground and it's just floating perfectly level. That weight balance is pretty amazing. So we're gonna just roll this up to the back of it. I'll just adjust the engine crane as needed and we'll see. It needs to come down a little bit and then I gotta get this thing holding the converter in and this tag off. I think that's almost right. Ooh, baby. A little bit up. Oh yeah, that's it. It's dead on. I just need to lift it up in the back a bit. Where are we, Jack? Jacking. Look at that, yes. Is that dowel in? That one is. What about the other side? No. Where is my hairbrush? Where is my hairbrush? Oh, where is my hairbrush? Down a little bit, I guess. All right, so these bolts are just 17s. Let's go ahead and just lightly run them down. Shouldn't be anything binding at this point. Yeah, we should be good to go now. On the topic of hurdles that I didn't know I would run into, one of them was when I pulled the engine, there was a ground strap attached to one of the transmission bolts down there. And of course, like I said, didn't know it was there. So when I pulled it out, I tore it and I cannot find that part OEM anywhere. So I had to go find the next best thing, but the auto parts store doesn't have anything close. This bolt doesn't fit through. I bought one and tried to drill it out, but they just ripped off of this. So I thought, well, what's my next best option? And I guess I figured I could just notch this, spread it just a wee bit, and then fit the bolt through it, and we should be cool, I hope. There is another ground strap on the other side of the engine, but there is two from the factory, and so I want two. Okie dokie, that feels more janky than I'm happy with, but it's on there and it's gonna do grounding things, so that'll work. And then there's two more bolts down here that actually go into the upper oil pan right there. We took these off like 2 episodes ago, but I had them in a bag sitting around, so we gotta put these back in as well. So these big bolts up here, the 17s, those are 53 foot-pounds, and the small ones I just showed you are 27. All the transmission bell housing bolts are now properly torqued. That is a huge accomplishment. The new one is on. So awesome. Just gotta route the wiring harness, which of course isn't gonna be terrible. Damn it. That goes right there. No! Okay, almost on. Now to plug in the broken connectors, unfortunately. Maybe I'll come back and replace these, but that looks like no fun. I don't think they should go anywhere. Famous last words. And then this one up front here with this little boot. Good to go. Then we have a chonky boy connector on this side. Now we're officially ready to get this thing put back in the car. And the reason why I don't want these transmission lines attached to it is they stick out, like the metal lines stick way out up here. And it proved to be quite difficult to pull it out of the car because of course I have a relatively limited space, having decided to pull the engine and transmission together. So when I'm coming back down, I want to get the crank pulley like right here, but I can't because those metal lines stick out quite a bit further. So I think this time I'm just going to leave those off. Oh, the only other thing is I just need to bolt back up the flex plate to the torque converter, and then we are ready to drop this mug back in that mug. Whew, that really sucks. But I got them all torqued and marked. Technically the torque spec is 60 foot-pounds, but there was no way I was fitting my torque wrench up in there, so I just did my best with a little impacty-whackty action. Oh, I'm exhausted, but now comes the even more exhausting part. We've come a pretty long way on this project. I mean, I bought it knowing it had a bad transmission, pulled the engine and trans out, which probably took me 8 hours or 10 hours total to get it out. Then I started tearing parts off it, discovered the egregious oil leaks. That took me many hours to pull all the cams out, rebuild the VVTi, replace all the seals, gasket maker, clean everything. It's been a ton of work, and we're in kind of the home stretch of getting this thing back in and ready for that first fire up. Let's keep this momentum going and try to get this beast back in its home. The most challenging part about getting this thing back in is just simply what you're looking at right now, where like it just tilts because of the weight, and the higher it goes, it kind of seems like the worse it gets just because of that, the way that the chain is attached. And I have a load leveler that is like a big screw that will tilt it, but then it makes that chain even longer, which won't work because if you remember when we were pulling it out, we hit the roof of the garage. The other thing is that the way that this worked, I ended up slightly scratching this kind of, I don't know, radiator support bar here. So the only reason this has to come up so high is just the AC condenser is there. I didn't want to open the AC system at all. So I don't know. I'm just gonna have to send it and figure it out. The only other thing I want to do is go ahead and swap out these little gaskets that live right there on the catalytic converter on both sides. That way when we mount it back, we don't have an exhaust leak. So these are very cheap. I think this was like $3 for the pair. So with the help of a ratchet strap off the chain down to the trans, I think this is as good as I'm gonna get it. So I might have to sacrifice some more scratches, but it's good enough, I think. I don't really like it because if it breaks, it's gonna go whoa, and it certainly could break. So let's, oh no, this is up and that has to come down. No, I have to undo my whole ratchet strap situation. Damn it. So surely if I take a thick Toyota Lexus genuine parts box and lay it over my core support, there's no way it could get scratched, right? It's just like, that's just science. Oh boy, I almost committed a crime. Oh no. Take two. Nobody saw that. Yeah. Definitely a little concerned with the garage height. I think we got, I don't know, maybe like another 1.5 feet or so, which it came out that way, so surely it's got to go back in that way, right? Yeah. I just yeeted it up and over, so now I got to go a little bit higher because you can see the core support is right there, and that's maybe about right at the gasket on the pan, so a little bit more, and we should be almost cooking with gas. No, don't fall off. We are almost there. I almost have the pan up over the core support, but my OEM hood strut is now in the way, so I got to reposition that. That'll do, donkey. That'll do. Okay. Stay. This is working. Almost. Our hood is going to be in the way though. Well, ye old pry bar is doing its work. That's about the sketchiest hood prop I've ever had, but I mean, I don't know what I can do because I can't take the hood off by myself. So let's get to getting before it falls. Big progress here. Transmission is over the ledge. Now is the sketchy part where we let out the ratchet strap, which is probably one of the things when I said what could possibly go wrong. That's it, because when it releases, it's like, pow! That wasn't as bad as I thought. Certainly not ideal, but hey, we're still in business. We're officially free of the ratchet strap. It definitely did its job, so now we just gotta play the engine crane game. Our engine is kind of resting right now on the pan, but I need the transmission to go down in the tunnel before I can do anything else really, because now, as you can see, the engine crane is hitting the hood, so we're out of space. I'm bending the flex disc, but it's in there. I gotta hurry. Oh, bending the core support some more. Shit. Oh, but that's it. That's money. Oh, couldn't get the jack to release lightly, and then of course that's what happens. Ooh. Almost. Oh, I think I need to get the jack underneath there and lift the transmission up now. We're almost there, baby. Please don't smush my condenser. Oh shit, my engine mount is... We're still about a foot off from the motor mount holes, so ways to go yet. It's never smooth with this thing. Gentlemen and lady, we are almost there. I think one big push and this right motor mount's gonna go in. Almost, not quite. I can almost pry it in. On the driver's side, we're super duper close. You can see that motor mount is right between the two holes. There's one that's a notch that is sticking down, that little nub, and then we just gotta slide that a little bit back. So I'm gonna try to pry it backward. Oh, that worked beautifully. Okay, that engine mount nut is on. It's not tightened, it's just on a couple of threads. Because what I'm hoping I can do is possibly use, like maybe I can just lift it and the engine will twist a bit, because we're not quite in our home yet for that mount. You can see it's bending a little bit, which we gotta fix ASAP. Let's see if this gives us the desired result. Yes, yes, it sure does. Beautiful. It is officially resting on its own engine mounts. Before I get this all disconnected, the AC compressor kind of fell in this process. So I need to pull this up and make sure I can actually get it out of that little nook it's in, because that's gonna be a pain in the arse. And then also see if I can get the oil filter housing on, because that is not there yet either. Got the AC compressor moved, and now we need to do our oil filter housing. There's this little figure 8 gasket that goes in here. So this is of course brand new OEM. I am so stoked with this progress. Engine is sitting on its mounts. I got the oil filter housing bolted up. AC compressor is just resting in place thanks to that little clip. But man, I mean, the rest of the stuff from here is pretty much a breeze. We'll have the radiator and the fans. We gotta do the hoses, transmission crossmember, AC bolts, thermostat housing. Those are the vacuum lines for the power steering system. Little coolant hose to hook up. We gotta replace the thingy on the firewall, the coolant diverter valve. And I forgot to tell you guys this, but last night before we got to this point, I was working on the power steering line. Super, super boring. And when it's out of the car, it's really easy to get to. Now, obviously, as you can see, pretty much no access, but we have a brand new reservoir that will sit right up here and look all nice and shiny. Thought it might be kind of interesting. From the second that I lifted this thing up on the engine crane to getting it in right there was nearly exactly 2 hours. The footage that I had was 3:30. Now it's about 5:30 later in the day. So 2 hours to get the engine back in, that's not too bad. I'd say we probably have another, I don't know, maybe 4 hours worth of stuff. We gotta do stuff like oil, coolant, bleed the cooling system. I'm sure there's gonna be something I forget. Also, another thing I wanna do before we drive, or maybe not necessarily right before we drive, but I wanna bleed the brakes. And I'm sure there's other things I'm forgetting along the way, but it's really not too bad. We are in the home stretch here. So we're picking back up on the amazing progress from the other day. It's currently 11 a.m. on Friday. The DMV closes at 4. So I wanna button up everything that we need to do to get this thing running and driving this weekend. So let's get to work and see if we can make it before the DMV closes. I was finally able to put the new hood struts on. So we have a functioning hood. Woohoo! Of all the things left on the list to get this thing running, I think getting these transmission lines back in is probably going to be one of the trickier things now. So this is the new line that I bought. Luckily, it was the one that I spun and twisted when I was trying to get it out of the transmission before. And then we're just reusing this other old line. So I think what I'm gonna try to do now is start from the back and just snake these up to the front. Luckily, in the engine bay, without the power steering pump and the alternator, there's quite a bit of room down there, so I think we're gonna be able to do it. And of course, the transmission crossmember is not in, so if we need to, we can lower it down to try to give us some more space. Come share in this misery with me. So I got these lines fished in, which was not even close to the difficult part. So what you gotta do is fish yourself right up there to that little fitting. But hey, By the way, the exhaust and the transmission pan are in the way, so I hope you have fun. The front line right there went in without a hitch. That one was really easy. So I decided, well, I'll take off this little exhaust weight here, which gave me just enough room to turn this about maybe a 1/16 of a turn at a time. So I'm having to alternate between my regular 17 and my new handy dandy 17 line wrench. So this one gets me about like that, which then gives me enough to go and then so it's pretty awful. This has been about 45 minutes and I still probably have a good 4 or 5 complete turns to go, and you can see my arm is shaking. Oh, this sucks. Oh my gosh, praise the baby Jesus. It is on. Both transmission lines are in the trans. That's back on. So we're just gonna start busting stuff off now. We need to go ahead and get the exhaust pipe mounted back up to the end of the manifold there. So let's just rock and roll. It's very difficult to record this stuff, but exhaust is on, all 3 brand new bolts on this side. So let's go ahead and do the other one, and then I think we'll move up top. It's already 1 o'clock and all I've done is bolt the exhaust back up and get those transmission lines in. This is honestly worse than putting the engine back in. This part I thought was gonna be such a breeze. I bolted that side of the exhaust up, then came over here and realized it wasn't lined up. So then the only way to fix that was to undo the other one. But then the weight of the exhaust when they're lined up was too heavy. Oh, it was such a nightmare. So now I guess let's move up top here. Like I said, I wanted to do what feels like 3 hours ago. Let's go ahead and just get these wiring harnesses kind of put back in their place. So this one's just gonna drape down here. Oh, I guess I gotta put the AC compressor back on to get the other plugs on it. In the meantime, we can go ahead and just get all our wiring back in the ECU here. That goes there. Easy. And this little clip comes back in here. Get the bolts in a minute, but we can put the cover on. It's 2:30 now. I'm beat, I'm exhausted, but I made some good progress. Mostly stuff underneath the car, so it's really difficult to film. I'll go ahead and catch you up to speed, but it's been a lot of work, and finally, I think we're getting towards the tail end, and we're approaching the first start. So that's what's keeping me going, because to be honest, I am physically and mentally struggling. I've been, let's just say I'm happy the camera hasn't been recording the whole time. Been some wrenches thrown, some words thrown. Oh boy, almost there. So the good news is the transmission is resting on its own weight now, on its own mount. Brand new transmission insulator there. The drive shaft is also bolted back up, which is great. The shift linkage, that gold rod right there, you can see that's bolted back up to the shifter in the car. Exhaust is on. I gotta put this little bracket on that bolts to the bottom of the transmission, and then the power steering lines up there also need to get bolted to the bottom of the front oil pan. Motor mounts are in and tightened down in those big circular holes right there in that subframe. Like I was working on earlier, AC compressor is now mounted securely to the engine, and everything here is looking good. So we just got the myriad of hoses and things to connect now. I gotta swap out that diverter valve and then just a couple of other things. So there'll be some progress here on the front of the motor, but we are fast approaching that first startup, which is super exciting. Go ahead and get our 2 AC compressor lines, which I set out to do probably 2 hours ago, but here we are finally. Uno and dos. But these 2 plugs here, this single wire is for the oil pressure switch, and then this one is for the crank sensor. Nice snap. And then the final one on this harness is the one that plugs into the power steering rack. Gonna go ahead and get the new power steering reservoir mounted up, and then we'll get our pump and the remainder of those hoses hooked up here. Ooh, and while this is off, I'm gonna take the opportunity to clean that real quick. Of course, the 10 is nowhere to be found. Fine, I was gonna use a wrench, but I'll use an impact gun. And then I wanna get my pump loosely put back in place because I don't know which way this hose goes. It's gonna go like that. Get our hose clamp on before it pops and blows me off in the face. This hose clamp is so annoying. It's like a double layer spring clamp, so it's extremely difficult. That one was such an annoyance. I'm just gonna use one of these, finally. So now I'm gonna mount it and see where I wanna clamp this. And then because of the way that all this mounts, we gotta get our alternator slid on so we can put the power steering pump in place. Don't wanna forget that and have to undo it. Like that. Okay, then there's just Big nut up top here, little nut on the small stud, and then a bolt on the bottom. 29 foot-pounds on the alternator. The little nut I'm gonna do by hand because that one's small. Then while we have easy access, I'm gonna go ahead and get the plugs, the 2 plugs on the top of the alternator. There we go. I'm gonna go ahead and do 29 foot-pounds on these also. Don't know why it's not, there we go. I was gonna say, I don't know why it's not clicking, that's weird. Now we can go ahead and get that hose fished on there. A little more silicone spray. Of course, I knew that was gonna happen, always. And then we'll just lock these clamps in place now. There we go, and one more. Perfect. All right, and then our other power steering hose. So that's got to go in like this, but we got to make sure to get both of these crush washers on it. Not gonna be able to torque this one down. And then as far as this other hose right here, it's not sold individually. It comes with this whole loop right here, which is unnecessary. So I just bought a little length of 3/8 hose, which is slightly smaller, but it'll be fine. So this is just a length of 3/8 power steering hose. So I really only need about a foot of it, like that. Hose is a little bit longer than I need, but I will take it. Power steering system is officially back together. Let's get that fuel line hooked back up before I try to go prime the engine and shoot fuel everywhere. Yeah. Good to go. Fuel line on. Let's go ahead and get these coolant lines hooked back up and replace this diverter valve. Come on, Mr. Valve, there we go. So here's the brand new OEM, AKA Denso diverter valve, and it's pretty cool because the whole idea with this thing is that instead of heat going through the heater core when you have the AC on, this little thing just switches it. So that's open, then when the AC is on, it just closes. So then no hot air is going through the cabin and it makes the AC system way more efficient. Super awesome. All right, new heater valve is on. I expected that to be more of a fight, but we still got an opportunity for that to happen. Okay, so then we just need to connect up this hose to right there. That one should just slot right on, yep. Okay. Like so. Awesome. Looking good. That was actually pretty easy. I really expected that little cable portion of it to be much more of a fight, but luckily it was not. All right, so we also got a couple of other hoses up here we need to swap out, like this one here. This one already broke off, so we just need to get this clip off. Look at that, it just cracks. That's crazy. There we go. This thing is hard as a rock. That is crazy. I mean, I know we've seen this a bunch already, but I can snap this. Yeah, that's what your rubber hose is supposed to do. I've been wondering where all this crusty stuff was coming from on the throttle body, but I think it was leaking out of this hose right here. Possibly, I think that's actually evap though. I think that's what this part of the system is. So yeah, I'm not sure why that is. Maybe it's this hose right here, which I probably should have replaced while I had the whole front of the engine off, but that will come another day, I would imagine. Another little bit and bob we have is this guy here because one of these little nubs broke off on this right here. Oh, it's this hose right here, and this little guy, the nipple that I showed you that broke off, is in there. So I wonder if I have a replacement line. I definitely didn't order that, but I wonder if I have one that's the right size, because fishing that out is going to be tough, and this thing is hard as a rock. That was a mistake. And of course that broke off, the hose itself. So I am just going to use the closest possible thing that I have and just make new lines. So that evap line is definitely not true to factory. It would come kind of up this way and a more sharper end, but that works. And got some fresh clamps on the brake booster line. We have a lot of stuff that we need to deal with here. I don't know what to do with it. Oh boy, almost forgot. It's a new day. I need coffee, which means we gotta get this thing working. And of course, it being Saturday, you might be wondering, well, Jonathan, how are we gonna drive this? It's not registered. That got demoted. That is going in the backyard, the relegation zone. I'm gonna steal the tag off that, put it on this, we're set. Okay, so we got our new PCV line on down to that purple grommet in the valve cover, and then new hose in here. So let's go ahead and get our transmission lines on, and then I think we can maybe put the belt on while we have a bunch of access, and then connect the cooling system. Uh-oh, another crime was committed. New belt going on. I think that's it. Let's go ahead and get an oil filter on before I forget and all the oil comes pouring out of the, the housing down there. Filter is on, so we just need to get this little coolant hose that runs right here and then up to the throttle body on, and that means removing the little black nut right there because it goes right there. Next up we have our transmission lines, the rubber that takes us from the hard line to the radiator. So let's go ahead and get these on. Uno and dos. New gasket, new thermostat going on. Thermostat goes in first, little jiggly bit goes up. So it turns out I forgot to order new lines that go from that little vacuum fitting on the power steering line up to the intake manifold and then into the intake itself. And then I also forgot to order that PCV hose right there. So we're gonna just rock with what we have for now and I'll replace those later. But while we have a bunch of space down here, I wanted to try to get that in there. It's so dark I can't even see it. Okay, so I got those installed down there. And then I'm 90% certain that that one there is going to leak because it's barely on, but we're gonna just roll with the punches and see what we can come up with. Now back to tightening down the thermostat neck there. I couldn't find a specific torque spec on this. Seems like it's about 13, so I'm just gonna go for 15. This is a 12 mil stud and bolt, so I think it'll be fine. I also forgot to show you guys that the condenser did take some damage here. It doesn't look like any of the horizontal cores are broken, but the fins are definitely damaged. So fingers crossed that doesn't leak. I didn't hear anything hissing or any odd smells or any, you know, strange colors, which would kind of indicate it's open, but fingers crossed. Now I think I've been looking over everything in here. I think it's time to get the radiator on, hook up the lines, and we can start filling stuff up. We need to put ATF for power steering fluid. We're just gonna run distilled water for now for the cooling system. I have some cheapo oil we're gonna use at first because I wanna change the oil really quickly. And then we're almost there. Okie dokie, it do be that time. Radiator time. I went ahead and just sprayed it off. Make sure everything's nice and clean. Oh, I forgot to order those radiator brackets. No! I have my old ones, but they're crummy and disgusting. I cleaned these, but they're all rusty. I'm gonna go hit them with some paint. Can't look any worse than it already does. While we're waiting for that paint to dry, I'm gonna repin this fan connector because this broke and I definitely don't want my electric fan coming unplugged. Okay, there we go. Then just right back in the new connector here. There we go. Boom, new fan connector on. And then we can go ahead and do our mass airflow wherever that ran off to. All right, these didn't turn out too bad. A little wet still, but that's okay. I'm just gonna go ahead and pop these bad boys on. Awesome, radiator is locked in. I went ahead and also got the transmission cooler lines hooked up. I do not know where my MAF plug went. I'm assuming it must be down there somewhere and I'm gonna have to fish it back up. But like, I lost it somehow and I don't know how that happened. I'm honestly embarrassed how long it took me to find this. I had to Google and then it was just like tucked way up under there like it belonged near the injectors. Oh, phew. This should be satisfying. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ooh yeah. Even though it's white instead of black, new mass airflow sensor is repinned. Woohoo! Fans are going back in. Bought new bolts, but of course they only had 5 and I needed 6. So we'll use 5 new ones because the other ones are super rusty and we'll reuse one of the old ones. Upper rad hose. E-fan connector. It didn't snap into place. What's going on here? Why you no go in? I'm gonna break this thing. What the hell? Why does everything have to be a problem? It's super annoying though to buy that connector and then it still not go on properly. Then of course, because Lexus, our ECU box is cooled, so we gotta slide this on and put the bolts back in the ECU box. Now it's time for the upper rad hose, and hopefully I didn't kink this thing because this heavy ass clamp has been up here this whole time, so hopefully this hose doesn't leak. Now it's on for real. This was actually backwards because I realized when this was rubbing the expansion tank here that wasn't right. So that looks much more clean and proper. Got this one on lockdown too, so we can start filling it up with fluids. ATF, distilled water for now, oil, trans fluid, get the air box back in, and then hit the key. I'm just using some standard cheap oil for now, just some 5W30, and this is 5.5 quarts. I'm gonna go ahead and do a full 6 because I'm gonna end up changing the oil pretty shortly after we get the engine up to operating temperature. The engine was open for so long that I don't know what kind of dirt and crap got down in there. So that's why I wanna just do a quick warm up cycle, change, and put good oil and fresh filter on there. Doesn't look like there's any active drips, so we are good to go to fill her up. Now let's fill it up with water. All right, so there is 2 gallons. The system is like 2.65 gallons roughly, but I mean, we had the entire cooling system apart, including the little expansion valve thing for the heater core, so we might need more than that. She is full. I mean, look at that. It said about 2.65 gallons. This is the 3rd gallon, about halfway. We are dead on. Maybe a little bit overfilled, but I'm sure by the time it circulates, it'll be better. Power steering time. That looks ridiculous, but it works. Just good old ATF in the power steering system. We're at the cold min line right now. I'm gonna leave that like so and go turn the wheel. You guys watch and see what happens. It came down a little bit, but until the pump gets running, I don't think it's gonna do that much. I buttoned up a couple of loose ends. I did the rear diff fluid. I bolted up that exhaust hanger so there's nothing hanging down. And now pretty much the last thing that we need to do is, I don't know if the transmission was empty. I assumed that it was. So I'm gonna check the transmission fluid level. And then I have a whole set of Toyota Type 4 ATF, which is the correct transmission fluid for this trans. So we're gonna fill it up and then we will turn the key. Well, I'll put the airbox back in, then turn the key. There's a little bit of fluid in there, but you can see the marks are way up there. So we got a long way to go. Just gonna do a little bit and check for leaks before I go too ham. No leaks yet, let's keep going. Oh man, my heart skipped a beat for a second because there was a leak. But luckily it's really far forward, and when I investigated, it's basically just the way that this funnel sits. It kind of backs up in there and then it leaked over the top where the funnel sits. So I'll just have to be a little bit more careful when I put it in, but should be a-okay. I think the transmission pan might be full for now. I got a good 4 quarts in there, which is about half of its actual capacity. So I'll be okay to start it for now since we're not even gonna drive on it just yet. Airbox is going in. Ow, I just slipped on transmission fluid. Ow. My leg scraped the bell housing of that transmission. Ugh, this is such a disaster. I can't wait to clean this up. We're almost there. I'm banged, bruised, exhausted. Okay, got just a couple of hoses to hook up here. I think I shared with you guys already. I forgot to purchase this one new, so that one's gonna have to live as is. This one is part of the power steering vacuum system right there. And we got another one right here for whatever this thing is. Air temp sensor maybe? That, and then this little connector. Let's tighten down these hose clamps. And then I think we're officially ready to hit the key once we put the battery back on. This will be the first time this car has seen power in like 3 months. It's time to turn the key, but we're not gonna see a full start yet. I unplugged the crank sensor because I want it to build oil pressure since it's been, down for so long with no oil. So we're going to let it crank over a good bit, and then I'll come back under, plug in the crank position sensor, and then we should fire right up. Oh, and also I guess that'll be good too, because then our power steering will pull down and we can refill that, check transmission fluid. So let's go ahead and give it a shot. Sounds great. That seems solid enough. Okay, I think it's finally that time. Where'd my key go? Here we go. Oh. I'm very nervous, but I don't think there's anything that I've forgotten. That window is very mad. Forgot about that. All right, here we go. Oh, I plugged the crank sensor back in, but what did I forget? The absolute worst possible thing just happened. The crank sensor plug wasn't going on, so I was like, oh yeah, I have a new thing, I'll go repin it. One side goes in fine, this side, the little metal tab breaks off. You can see part of it's in there, the other part's not. So I have no idea how to fix this. This is show stopping. The car's not going to start without the crank position sensor, and I don't know how to fix that. I'm so unbelievably devastated. I can't even begin to describe. So I went to O'Reilly's and got this little connector, which said it was for a crankshaft position sensor for a Toyota, which it is definitely not. That is not the right shape. It said it would work for the LS430, but that doesn't matter because I went ahead and just harvested the plugs off of this. So basically I'm just going to cut and splice this onto that other connector on the car, and we should be back in business. But man, yet another setback I did not anticipate. Okie dokie, that surprisingly worked. I went ahead and soldered it. It's not the most beautiful thing ever, but I think it should work. I'll wrap that up with some electrical tape. I don't have any heat shrink tubing that I could put around that, but I'll get that at a later date. And then let's see if that fixes our problem. Please, please. Please just work, little car. Oh, that's a loud ding. That sounds happy. Nope. Both of my little OBD readers are not connecting, so I'm wondering if maybe the ECU plugs I got mixed up, or they're not seated properly, because we're just getting no symptoms and I can't read the codes. So guess I'll check that. Well, 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 what do we have here? Some troublemakers. That one not seated. I don't know how that happened. I work on computers. I know better than to leave things unseated. There we go. Turns out when 3 of your ECU connectors aren't plugged in, your car probably won't start. Who would have thought? ECU is reconnected. I see no reason this should not work. Cross your fingers. Woo! Yeehaw! Oh, we have an exhaust leak. Damn it. But it's running. Woohoo! Wonder where that exhaust leak is from. Hopefully it's not the... What? Where's that coming from? Stuff burning off the exhaust. All the stuff I was touching, probably. That's a lot of smoke. I'm gonna go ahead and turn it off real quick. Well, it's alive! It's alive! With an exhaust leak and a lot of stuff for it to burn off. But finally, oh my God. I'm gonna try it one more time, just kind of see where that exhaust leak is coming from and just check everything else out. It's definitely on the passenger side over here. It must be, I think that manifold right there is not fully bolted up, maybe. It's like not quite seated properly, perhaps. I wanted to bring you guys down here to the exhaust because there's really no good way for me to convey how difficult and grueling this whole process has been, except just to look at that. I spent probably 2 hours on the exhaust yesterday getting it bolted up, and in all the fighting, I just forgot to tighten this side down. So easy fix, but kind of annoying. That sounds more like an LS should. Woo! Oh my gosh, I can't even believe we're here. We gotta get some power steering fluid in there. That's looking a little bit low, but it sounds fantastic. I also wanna let it get it fully to operating temperature, like I said, because then I'm gonna drain the oil, put some fresh oil in it, and I want it to open up the thermostat so that the cooling system is bled. No leaks. All good to go. And once I get it warmed up here in a minute, I'm gonna come in and do the transmission where you kind of put it in reverse for a while, then neutral for a while, go through each of the gears so that you get the fluid flowing, and then that way we can pull some out of the pan into the trans. But I mean, before, you remember with the other trans and the old torque converter, it would just go, and that's not happening. I'll give her a little rev. Yeah, it would have already been whining. Great, that's awesome. I cannot believe it. Hey, look, our temp's going up. The old owner left us with a bunch of fuel so we can go for a great test drive. Oh yeah. Brake wear sensor, I discovered, is because somebody installed this brake pad wear sensor incorrectly, and obviously it's worn down. So I'll have to fix that at some point. I'm gonna end up doing brakes on this, I'm sure, at some point. But otherwise, all that smoke is cleared up. That was probably just oils and brake clean and various fluids like that were on the exhaust, and you know, my hands touching everything. Sounds good. All right, so I need to turn up the heat here so we get the cooling system bled properly. So we got to go max hot and then max fan up. I don't want the, how do I stop the swing? I don't need AC. There we go. And then it's going on hands and feet. That'll be fine. Still ice cold, so definitely bubbles in the cooling system. Still not super hot, so what I'm gonna do is just rev the engine up a bit. I think the procedure says something like 2,000 RPM. You just hold it there for a little while. You alternate between like 2,000. Oh, now it's getting warm. It's getting really hot now. Woo! Screaming. Yeah, get that air out of that cooling system. Breathe on that key, dude. So now what I want to do is, I think I pretty thoroughly bled the cooling system, probably a little bit more to do, but we can worry about that later. What I want to do now is just go through the gear so we pull some of that transmission fluid down, check the level, and then make sure it's fully topped up. So all you got to do is just shift into each gear, and you basically just hold it there for 10 or 20 seconds. I like to count to 30, and then you just repeat. 30 more seconds, 30 seconds, 30, oh, and then back up, 30, 30, 30, 30, 30. And then you can go check it again. So that should be solid. Then we can just sit in reverse or neutral for a second. Definitely felt that shift. Then down into drive. And then we'll just go back up and we'll go check the fluid. Put on my welding gloves so I can actually reach the dipstick. Seems like we're at the right level, perhaps even just a bit over. So I think I'm gonna just take it for a quick little spin. 50% of the tires are about to touch the ground for the first time, and I can't even remember how long. Ooh, yeah, baby. And the other 50%. These cars are so crazy because when I have the fan on for the AC, like I can't even hear or feel the engine running. This is so nuts. So let's go ahead and take this thing for its inaugural test drive. I don't want to go too far because I'm not confident that the transmission has enough fluid in it, so we might need to do that process again, but I still want to go take it for a spin. So let's drop it in reverse real quick and we'll just go back and forth in the driveway. Oh yeah, I mean immediately, just like it actually functions like a car. Also the brakes are kind of rusty a little bit from sitting for a while, so gotta make sure to keep that in mind. What if we put it in drive? Feels good. No strange noises. We'll just go around the block real quick. We're cruising, and there's no awful transmission noise. Baby. Oh man, I can hardly believe it. Shocks are really clunky, unfortunately. I think the top hats and the shocks themselves are probably boom roasted, but that's okay. I'll take it. I just have wanted to enjoy this car for so long now that I will address the suspension, but I don't care right now. I just want to enjoy it. Oh, it's so buttery, dude. Even with blown shocks, these cars are ridiculous. Oh my gosh. It's so good. I know I'm going 25, but still. Coming from my Land Cruiser as my daily, this is just like complete night and day. So again, just wanted to do a quick loop around, and then when we get back to mi casa, I'll check the transmission fluid, and then we'll go for a longer drive. So I'm back and the fluid level looks perfectly fine. It's a little bit over the full mark, but I think that's okay because I now have a check engine light for code P0753. It says shift solenoid A. And I can't really find anything in terms of that being like a damaged transmission. It looks like it's just one of the little solenoids inside of the valve body under the, inside the transmission pan. But the car seems to be good. The only thing I've noticed is that it's a little sluggish from drive. Like if you put it in drive and let your foot off the gas, you kind of don't really go anywhere. And once you give it a little bit of gas, it revs and then it goes. So that seems slightly wrong. But what I am gonna do is just drive it around a little bit more. I think it's safe based on the fact that our fluid level is perfectly within the safety, margins there. And maybe by some magic, it'll clear up. But I did press the gas pretty hard. Like I was waiting for it to downshift to kick up to a higher gear to give me some more power, really, because I wanted to see if the VVTi was working, and it didn't really downshift in the way that I was expecting. So I'm gonna do what I set out to do earlier, which was take this car to get some coffee. Don't mind the fact that this clock is wrong, but it's close. It's 3:30 right now, and I set out to get the car. I thought I would have it running and driving to get coffee at like 11. The coffee shop I wanted to go to is closed, so this will do. But mission accomplished. We definitely still have some kinks to work out, like check engine, VSC, but I accomplished the goal. The car is officially out of the house, out of the driveway, so pretty awesome. I'm gonna take it for another little test drive and let's see how it does on the way home. Well, I've been driving for 32 miles, the trip meter says, and everything just feels fine. Occasionally I hear a noise that I don't really like when I'm coming right off the line, like from drive, but I mean, it feels pretty solid. I've checked the fluid level like 8 times, gone home, back and forth, and it seems okay. So I think I'll probably have to buy that solenoid or get the one off that's on there and clean it. But to do that, I'm gonna need new pan bolts. I need a specific orange kind of RTV, FIPG for the pan gasket itself. But otherwise, I think I'm just going to enjoy the car. I think it's fine. I think. Famous last words. Well, I'm back home and I don't know what else to say. I think it's a success. Obviously that VSC light and the check engine light related to that code is not ideal, but certainly solvable. I mean, it's running and driving now and it's really great. The only other problem that I've encountered so far is that the AC is pretty weak, which it wasn't before. So maybe I did damage that condenser, or possibly there's a slow leak somewhere, or both. Thanks to all of you who have subscribed and stayed through the video this long. I know this was a long one. Hopefully the payoff was worth it. It certainly was for me, and there'll be plenty more content on this car. So if you're interested, definitely stay subscribed, and I'll see you in the next one. Sayonara.